First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Patrick Hyatt. I work for GlaxoSmithKline. I lead the Pharma 4.0 team within a group called Advanced Manufacturing Technologies currently. We'll introduce the panel after a few short slides. And today's session aims to be super practical. What we want to do is demonstrate through some engagement how Industry 4.0 technologies can move from being a bunch of buzz terminology to something that can be utilized to really impact efficiency and productivity within a commercial manufacturing operation. So that's what we're trying to achieve in this session today. So we can kick off with a question. So we've heard a lot about the fourth industrial revolution. So the question that I'm going to propose to all of you immediately is, do you feel that it's an industrial revolution for the pharma organization or an industrial evolution? So let's have some hands. Let's see, who thinks it's a revolution for our industry, for the pharma industry? Let's see some hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Verging pockets of revolution. That's great. And now let's see exactly who feels that this is, a bit of an evolution. We're not seeing the impact. I think that's the key. That's the key that we want to try and get across. How do we both strategically? Still got your hand up. You can put it down now. How do we strategically meet the goals for our industry as well as tactically? See, one of the things about an agile way of working is to show minimum viable product quickly through a series of deliverables to be used as a lighthouse to show promise. And that's one of the key drivers that hopefully we're going to talk about today. So I've got a few slides that we're going to just run through very quickly. So Pharma 4.0. So the key, as you'll see, is that there is a structure required. There's a digitization opportunity, the various processes, the employee skills, organization, IT infrastructure. A company has to go through a lot of change. But within that change, there's an adoption of many different technologies. Now, if we think about organizations that have really taken this revolution and made it pay for them, think about automotive. They had a reason to do it. They had a strategy that they had to follow, and that was around customization. If you think about aerospace, their servitization model drove the way they wanted to apply Industry 4.0 technologies. And it's the same for pharma. So in terms of biopharm, is it about speed of tech transfer, end-to-end data sets, being able to use data effectively in a modern way, better stability, increased yields? For a high revenue product in a brownfield site, it might actually be just performance, OEE improvements, productivity. In a greenfield site, we maybe setting an operating model that is completely different to what has been experienced before to drive efficiency. So no matter what we see as an opportunity in our business, the key to Pharma 4.0 technologies is integration. So if we can integrate these systems together, move away from a platform approach to solutions, to an integrated system of systems, we can start to show a greater than the sum of the parts within that strategy that we set ourselves. So very briefly, in GSK, we went on a journey. So we decided to show the art of the possible, initially in an incubator. The purpose of this was to bring in companies from the outside that weren't associated with our industry, learn from the gaming industry, learn from another number of industries and get the best so that we could learn, be humble enough to admit that we needed to learn in this space, in the digital space. We used it as a space to bring in regulators, and really importantly, we used it as an engagement space for the company to sell the art of the possible. And it was successful in generating a key project, and that was a project that we developed in Hertfordshire. And we started off on a journey. You're not going to be able to read this, but not the point. The point is that the grey is foundational systems, ensuring that you're acquiring the right level of data. The blue is making sure that we go paperless. Those are two initiatives that are already well underway within our organisation. But what we wanted to do is show how Industry 4 technologies could supplement each of these programs, and we aligned the actual solutions to problems that the business were facing. Deviation-free operations, data integrity, productivity, performance, visibility, platform stabilization. We showed how you could get a greater than sum of the parts value by integrating this system of systems. And that was a key strategy. This is what it looked like over 25 different projects run by one group on one product at one site at the same time. A real razor focus on delivery to bring this factory into a digital world. Now, that's exactly what the project was. The project was about going paperless. The project was about some very specific productivity goals. But what we did is on this journey, so it was an infrastructure project. You could consider it an infrastructure project. On this journey, we really did start to look at predictive interventions. And predictive interventions was a project where we said, we are deliberately not going to have a GMP environment for a big data cluster. We're not going to validate it, and it's not going to be GMP. We are going to try and use as much data that's already available, bring it into this cluster, and show value from it, and drive new insights. And that was very different to our thinking previously. We'd always, set up a stall at a project, a 3-4 year program of work, and at the end of it, consider how we were going to use the data in a GMP environment. We decided to do something very different here, and we started to show real value. One project saved £18 million worth of lost profit revenue. Another project, and that was around computer vision, applying computer vision. Another was a golden batch setting project using artificial intelligence. That also had major impact, over £5 million impact at that particular project. Of course, our senior leaders then recognised that in parallel to the infrastructure project, this digital factory project, we could accelerate our ambition on what other projects we could use to drive performance, optimization, and efficiency. And we did that through digital twin work, reduced technical downtime and rejects, AI-guided line speed increased, golden batch settings again, no surprise, predictive performance, you might know that as predictive maintenance, new sensing technologies, computer vision modeling. So all of these technologies are now being applied with a very deliberate attempt to reduce overall capital spend. And that, the size of the prize there is, for a product, GSK would have to spend a significant amount of money to meet peak year sales for a product. And the infrastructure that we needed to put that in place is in the hundreds of millions. If we can drive up operational efficiency on the equipment that we have and the infrastructure we have, it can make a massive difference to the way that we run our business. So we go from some tactical solutions to an evolution to a revolution where we are starting to apply these technologies and get real value strategically within the organisation. So I thought that would be a good way of just setting the scene today. Now I'm going to introduce the panel, and we're going to run through some questions. What we're going to do is, we've probably got about 6 different questions the panel are going to answer, but after each question we're going to open the floor for feedback and some questions from yourselves. So, I've introduced myself.
Very good.
Go on, Sean.
Very good. Okay, so I'm Sean Birmingham. I head up the Life Sciences business at PSE, Process Systems Enterprise. And our business is to develop a software-based capability for the creation of digital twins of both drug products and the manufacturing processes. This is a journey we've been on for 8-9 years. Probably most of the top 20 pharma companies use the technology, and we have been fortunate enough to be developing this technology in 2 big collaborative initiatives. One is the UK Adopt project, which is a digital design and digital operation project, which aims to use digital twins to design product and manufacturing processes with minimum amount of material, and to be able to assess their robustness in a much more comprehensive manner. And then the other initiative that we're involved in is called the Systems-Based Pharmaceutics Alliance, where we look at not just looking at the design of products and manufacturing processing steps individually, but a complete systems view. That's why it's called Systems-Based Pharmaceutics, where we look to reduce the iterations between designing and optimizing products and manufacturing processes, and being able to link variability, disturbances, decisions directly through not just to a tensile strength or other properties of the tablet, but the actual bio-performance in terms of area under the curve, Cmax, and so on.
Brilliant. Andy?
Yeah.
So my name's Andy Whiteock. I'm actually based in Germany at the headquarters for Siemens in a group which is focused on bringing Siemens solutions to the pharmaceutical industry. My particular focus is on the digitalization aspects, so new software, new solutions, and working with companies on strategic initiatives and projects, paperless, continuous, simulation, these types of things. Working with most of the different, like Sean would say, the top 10, top 20 companies on these digital transformation strategies. I'm also involved in the ISPE 4.0 strategy and also Bioforum on the steering committee for the technology roadmap there as well, representing Siemens on those different organizations. So that's me.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay.
Werner?
Yeah. Werner Big, also located in Germany, in Munich. I have two roles. One is I am co-founder and chief representative of ROI Management Consulting Company. We're doing meanwhile business since more than 20 years. Since more than 5 years, we detected, let me say, this Industry 4.0 issue. I do not think that this is a revolution. I think this is an evolution. The target is to make use out of the toolset which the toolset provides. And since 2013, we are presenting the yearly Industry 4.0 award in Germany, meanwhile also in China. And for us, it's a very good opportunity to see how far the German spoken industry is in terms of Industry 4.0 implementation. And what is really interesting is that we have had 4 years where there was a lot of conferences and you can read everything about all these things, but nothing have been implemented and done. And since 1 year, there's, let me say, a very strong move to implement things, not to speak anymore and to discuss anymore, but also to try also to have an error and then to say, okay, stop, this was the wrong way, but nevertheless to get familiar with all these tools and to make use out of it. My other role is that I'm a professor at the Technical University of Applied Science in Regensburg in the field of supply chain management since more than 20 years, and this combination is a very good, let me say, way of seeing topics in the theoretical, with a theoretical background as well as in the practical background in the consulting.
Thanks, Werner. George?
Hi everyone. My name's George Marinos. I work for PA Consulting. We are a global consulting company which specialises in technology, innovation and consulting. We have about 3,000 staff around the world. Specifically, I work within the operational excellence team, and I also within that lead the digital supply chain proposition that we have. That's sort of come about from the last 4 years of work, really helping sort of clients to sort of implement digital technology and enhance their supply chains. Mainly starting off within automotive, but certainly I have for the last 3 years working within life sciences industry as well.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. So in terms of Industry 4 technologies, what would you say are some of the most exciting technologies that pharmaceutical companies can adopt and really benefit from? Some people call them silver bullet technologies, but you know, what would you advise as being really hot at the moment?
So I think we were I heard it yesterday as well about this data, about managing data, the different systems. What's the difference between a lake and a cloud and all these different expressions, and what value can I get from them? So for me, I would start at that point. is the management of big data, the use of it, and then being able to do simulation or analytics on top of that, but the tools that are rapidly improving to be able to manage more and more quickly and more effectively data. Yeah, so for me, it starts with that. Then you can link into that nice, all the different applications of that. But it comes back to getting value from the data by having structure and a common data model. This is what we see a lot.
Okay. Yeah, George.
I mean, I think we're seeing lots of different organisations looking at exploring with different types of technology, from virtual reality around improving the training and capability of their people, all the way through to sort of flexible production lines which can sort of react to sort of customer demand at an instant. I think a lot of those sort of technologies are really seeking to drive kind of one of three things around sort of performance improvements, for instance, OEE, as sort of Patrick mentioned earlier. More of an end-to-end transformational change, but also, longer term around agility and becoming a completely agile organisation. I think the one sort of picking up on your point, I think data is the most interesting one. I think it's still quite untapped. I think there's lots of work that's going on. I think there's a plethora of sort of use cases, and we've had lots of discussions on this, Patrick, on the amount of use cases that are available to organisations. And I think the only thing that's holding organisations back is really around its internal capability and infrastructure to do that, and really getting access to people. But I think certainly what we're seeing in pharma around some of the, using AI to speed up clinical trials and obviously improve the performance of those is really, really interesting. I think around sort of even machine learning capability and really trying to sort of drive improvements in performance of even just a machine within a factory, where, for instance, RCA processes historically haven't been able to do that, I think is really, really fascinating and a real opportunity.
Should I?
Yeah, go for it.
Yes. Also, point number one is, but I have also a second one. Point number one is also data. When I look to the history of our award, it's pretty interesting how this evolved, the management and the handling and the use of data. 4 years ago, the first thing and more or less the only thing the companies are doing with the data is only to understand where they are, means to collect information, to structure information, to understand technological processes, to understand business processes, and perhaps to do some kind of benchmarking, internal benchmarking, external benchmarking. A very good example there is Bosch in a plant where they do modules for braking systems. They have worldwide more than, let me say, 5,000 equipments which are more or less collecting data in the same way. And in their headquarters in Germany, they are able to compare on a daily, real-time basis the performance of these equipments. And they are very quickly in the position to say, where do I have a good OEE and where do I have a bad OEE, and what is the root cause therefore. It's the first step in the use in the use of data. Then the next evolution process or step is to say, okay, how can I provide the operator with condensed information to make his life easier in terms of, I have a problem with my machine, and what is most probably the root cause therefore, and the next step is then to provide like a kind of Google to provide, or a wiki to provide this information to the operator. And the next step then is a prediction to say, okay, what will happen, pattern recognition, to prevent stops, to prevent errors. And this is meanwhile where a lot of companies also are ongoing, but let me say 75% of all companies are meanwhile in this first level of making data, making information available. And this is very, very helpful and brings you forward. So self-awareness is the first step to get better. Yeah. So then the next point is, what is for me also very important, is to use the tools you have meanwhile to finally implement the idea of supply chain management. The idea of supply chain management is more or less 30 years old, 35 years old. And at the very beginning, it was a great idea, but nothing happened because it was not feasible to implement this idea, to link all the partners in the supply chain together. This was neither technical nor organizational, on an organizational aspect, feasible. Meanwhile, it is feasible. And the big companies in Germany, especially the automotive industry, are on the way to implement at least for the most important, let me say, partners in the supply chain, to implement such kind of system where they see the critical resources. And this is the first place where we are now able to say, okay, we have the organizational aspects which are preconditions which are relevant, we have the technical, and now we are in a position to implement this tool. That's why for me this is very exciting.
It's like companies like E2 Open that are forging ahead with that type of connectivity with suppliers are really interesting because their model is about connectivity and then visualization. And what's happening through that visualization is that people that manage the supply chain in an organization are starting to think outside of silo. And the aha moments are going off all over the place because they're connecting that supplier data with the data that's inside their organizations, and they're really considering the relationships that they have with their suppliers in a different way and how their business operations will change on the basis of it. So it's going from acquisition to visualization to insight to a situation where we're then using that data for more predictive ways of running their supply chain. So this is a very common evolution that happens when companies adopt a digitalization or an industry for application. Sean, did you have a point in technology?
Yes, so I think from our perspective, the most interesting opportunities arise from the ability to take mechanistic models, predictive science, and combine it with high-performance computing and data analytics. This combination allows us to do very extensive virtual designs of experiments, which give us a much better assessment of robustness of processes, whether we're looking at designing a new process or if it's an existing process and we're looking at switching to other excipients, can we do a comprehensive assessment of what the effect is going to be of different variability on this process. So secondly, and we're talking about virtual DOEs not with 10, 20 samples, but maybe hundreds of thousands of millions of samples because we have high-performance computing. These mechanistic models actually don't require a lot of data, but actually fairly limited data. So it also, this combination of technologies allows many more, many more compounds to be taken through the pipeline. But for us, the really interesting bit is the data analytics, where although mechanistic models are deterministic, the thing that gives us variability, and this is what affects robustness, is because we have patient-to-patient variability, we have raw material variability, we have uncertainty in the data that is being used to calibrate these models. And although we can run sensitivity calculations, the key is what are the input distributions for all these sources of variability. So if we have the ability to collect huge amounts of data and do the analysis and find out what are the distribution functions that represent raw material variability, physiological variability, environmental factors, and so on, we can understand, we can really quantify robustness. I think in this industry, robustness is always a bit of a vague concept, so we can quantify robustness, and we may be looking at 10, 20 factors. We can also find out which of these factors is responsible for maybe 50% of the variability. So if we're looking for mitigation strategies to improve robustness, we'll have a much better guide in terms of, is there something in the supply chain we need to address, or is it actually the quality of data that isn't good enough, so that we can look at, do we need more data, more accurate data, and so on. So I think this combination of technologies really allows us to have a step change in understanding robustness and addressing it, and I think that is one of the key things in this industry, is a robust product for the patient.
Yeah. Let's open up questions for the floor in this particular topic. Are there any questions or perhaps technologies that people have utilised effectively? While people are being brave and putting their hands up, what I would say in terms of data come out as a real big theme, but there are some silver bullets in terms of the way we acquire, manage, drive standards, and utilise data that are different. Data virtualization platforms where we can start to map data and visualize multiple systems together, be much more structured about the way we use data. Other big data engines, big data clusters that can be developed, you know, and built very, very rapidly. As long as you've got a good strategy of driving ingestion, data cleaning, connection, where data can be reused in those pattern matching tools, then, you know, that's a very, very powerful way of using data very differently. Was there a question over there?
Yeah, just a quick question. It's very exciting, and it sounds from the experts on the panel as if things are really starting to gather pace, and there's a lot more about implementation now rather than ideas and innovation.
Yeah.
I guess just a very general question. It gets raised a lot in conversations at the moment about artificial intelligence, but how do we envisage this affecting the, if you like, the pharmaceutical and the supply chain workforce? Because the people at the end of the day, we can process the data, we can probably process it much faster. I'm not an expert, but it sounds as if we're making quantum leaps in all of those dimensions. But the potential implications on the people that are in place, in use, how do we envisage, I guess, almost, does it have to be stepwise management? You know, will it be drinking from the fire hydrant? How are all of these different opportunities that this data analysis is going to give us, how is that going to affect our workforce, and how are we planning for that? Is that part of the concept as well, not just the tools and the software? I guess, what about the implications on the workforce?
Very much so. I
Do
would
you want to field that one?
For me, there's two aspects to what you're talking about there. The first is this, we heard it yesterday, this lights out manufacturing, where I don't need any people anymore at all. It's not necessarily around artificial intelligence, that's a high degree of automation. And we keep talking about the car industry, the automotive industry, where they've achieved that with these very repetitive processes. But now they're able to use data and able to use the information to have more customization of the different processes. And this is something that I think we're a long way from being able to do in pharmaceutical. We can do it in parts. I heard something recently about how, on a panel I was on, that the cost of manufacturing today is 50% of that is labour cost. That's related to not just the operators, but also the GMP, the reviewers, the QA, this type of stuff. The next industry has about a 15 or 20% labour cost as their total cost of manufacturing. Yeah, so we're way different to many other industries. And there are reasons for that. I think we're quite familiar with that. But that's a fundamental way where we can start to see some interest by using not just robotic, but cobotics as well, where you've got this real interaction alongside people and they're able to take out some of the repetitive tasks. And setting yourself that target of saying, no, I want a complete lights out manufacturing, I think is some way off. Then the artificial intelligence, maybe someone else can talk about artificial intelligence.
Well, I mean, just really, a really quick answer to that is what's been proven time and time again is that human-computer symbiosis is the way forward. It's not only about AI tools, it's about how you engage people in that process. I think it does lead you to a point which is really important, and that is that we need to upskill in new areas. And the universities need to step up, bring in on new courses, practical applied courses. We need to, give people a reason to believe that this is a fantastic environment to work in pharma. And there's been some successes. There's some good stories about people coming into our industry and being really excited about bringing some of the innovations that are happening outside it in. So yes, there's definitely going to be reskilling, definitely. So thank you for that question. Oh, we've got another one? Yeah.
Yeah, I just a question about where you see your task ending, if you like. So you can make super efficiently your nice packaged boxes, and they go to your gate and you send them off. And they get to my dad and he forgets to take them half the time, or he gets the blue pill mixed up with the other blue pill that he should be taking. How do you see these technologies benefiting the sort of post-production data sets downstream and making medicine 4.0, if you like?
Anyone got an answer there? I mean,
No, Karen.
No. Did you have an answer?
I have, but you've probably got a better one. So
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Carry on.
First of all, I don't know why I allowed you to ask the question, because I knew you'd ask that. But I think that we don't truly have a handle on exactly how there are a number of tactical projects and programs that are going on in the industry to engage with the patient. But the question is, what will diagnostics look like in the future? How will we have a meaningful relationship with the patient? In what form will it be? Will it be a device? How are we going to be trusted with the data? Will we have access to the data, or will we have to go to Apple to get it? You know, these are the type of questions that are perplexing. And yes, there are tactical projects. There's islands of integration with our customers. And even that's an interesting notion. Will they be patients in the future, or will we be selling a wellness agenda, driving down risk in terms of safety and increasing efficiency for the payers? So I didn't answer it, but anyway,
I think the point is that every major pharmaceutical company is now incorporating some kind of diagnostic part to their business. Yeah, and so that, by that definition, just that simple fact, is transforming the way that they're thinking about future delivery models. And the question really is, where are we today? And that will depend on different therapies, different drugs, different companies. One of some work that I've been doing is on personalized medicine, and I think that's a fascinating aspect of how they're using the data to do the individual, take the individual cells, do the cell therapy, and then input that back into the patient. And only through using technology are they able to make that therapy less than, you know, rather than being hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds, dollars, whatever. It's, you know, their vision is to make that affordable so that people can actually pay for it themselves, and that's going to have to check. That's what will change.
And I guess, I mean, from my point of view, the custom intimacy side of it can't be no bad thing. So obviously you've got the advantages of actually, you know, tailored drugs, which is clearly going to have its benefits in terms of success for the patient, but also just being a lot closer to that customer and understanding their needs and being able to set up a business and a supply chain that can react to that. And you'll probably find that, you know, sort of things like lead times and so forth will become a lot less around digital technologies, and organisations' ability to adapt to that need will certainly change as well.
John?
Yes, I think there are some very interesting opportunities. What I'm going to say is not going to, I think, address any of the compliance, you know, whether someone takes the medication, but with the digital twins that we and others develop for drug products, you know, and these techniques I was talking about earlier, where we can look at inter-patient variability, you know, there is also an opportunity to use those similar digital twins to look at intra-patient variability and being able to actually see, you know, is there something in the physiology or, you know, the way that someone's responding to the drug changing, and you know, and being able to, of course, this is not going to happen today or tomorrow, but you know, can we use the you know, any measurements of how the person responds together with proper understanding of how that drug product works to come up, you know, with more adaptive dosing and so on. So you know, so this inter and intra-patient variability is something that's getting, I think, a lot more attention, and trying to understand how that really affects the performance of the product. And you know, from a scientific perspective, you know, you could design a system where you could, I think, use those digital twins, but there's probably, you know, a lot of complexities in terms of getting data and getting acceptance for the tools to be used to come up with these adjustments in those.
So moving on to a slightly different question. So have you guys seen barriers to adoption of these technologies? Do you have a perspective on that?
I think one thing your slide showed very nicely is it's such a large tool set. So I think the first artificial intelligence we could do with is selecting the appropriate mix of tools. And I generally think that is a big challenge. I think we, you know, even, you know, people here who are relatively knowledgeable, I think we still struggle to understand what all these different tools can do and how they should be combined, and what benefits we can get, what the limitations are. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing related to adoption is that you know, I think sometimes people hide behind the regulator as a reason why certain things can't be done. I'm sure there are cases where it's a valid reason, but it does seem to come up quite often as a reason to not do things. Similarly, I think, you know, there are also cases where, you know, where we probably should feel there's a barrier to adopt, but, you know, we have this sort of blanket approach that we're going to just adopt a certain technology everywhere.
Yeah.
And thinking about, you know, you know, if I look at the continuous manufacturing sort of debate, very often at conferences they'll say, you know, we haven't moved full scale from batch to continuous because of regulatory hurdles. But there are lots of industries that don't have any regulatory barriers in that sense, but still do a lot of batch manufacture and sometimes do continuous and so on. So I think, you know, there is definitely a challenge in when to apply certain technologies, and so I'm hoping that, you know, in the next few years, you know, we all talk about data being important, but we have to go beyond, you know, big data is the answer, or to get value from it. Yeah. Mm.
It's right, because minimum viable product is not just about getting something that shows value quickly. It's about learning and understanding exactly how your operation is going to change, how you use data. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you say, well, we're not going to go through that process, we're just going to go for a waterfall validation attempt to put in a whole infrastructure in, there's a lot that you're not learning while you go through that build. So it's really important to try and use data at every opportunity. So one example was where we talked to the regulators and said that we plan to build a model and gain insight from that model around a specific use case. And then once we get that insight, we're going to change within the registered parameters the set points on a machine. How do you view that? And it was, you've just driven insight and understanding around your equipment. It's absolutely acceptable to go ahead and make that change. Mm-hmm. When you do that on a number of different processes, a number of different models, you're building an ecosystem of new thinking that helps you design a GMP system in much better clarity, with much better purpose. So it's a really good point. It's about how can we show impact within 1 to 2, maybe 3 weeks, a month, not these great big long deployment programs that can really stifle innovation. Yes, Ben?
I see only one barrier, and this barrier is a mental one. Because when you look to the time frame I explained, it took roughly 4 years to mitigate this barrier, because there's the elephant is too big, and what should we do first, and this costs a lot of money, and we need a big infrastructure, and we need thousands of euros to be spent, and but this is not true. You can start quickly. You can start in an area where you can implement within 4 or 5 weeks an MVP or a first use or a showcase or whatever. You should get familiar with it. You should have a clear, structured way how to approach, but you have to also be agile enough to accept errors as well as successes. And then for me, it's not the question if, but the question when.
So that's a really, really important point. Another question that we could ask is around, actually it came up earlier today, and the point was that innovation doesn't have to be just about technology innovation. It can be about program change, innovation in the way you make change happen. So has anyone had any successes in using innovative approaches to drive a program or around the Industry 4? Yeah, George?
Yeah, should I pick up? I guess maybe answering both questions there. Some of the barriers that I've certainly seen are probably around just, you know, the sort of legacy approaches to delivering programs that sort of pharma and all organisations really have. So, you know, typically digital projects are multifunctional. They impact the business end to end usually, and organisations are used to delivering these projects as functional projects, maybe, you know, where you're sort of almost like a typical IT project, for instance. And that can sometimes be a little bit maybe cumbersome, slow, and doesn't actually engage with the whole business. So I think, you know, and I think in addition to that, I think, you know, some of these digital programs are multifunctional. They're using technology where there isn't a lot of experience. So actually deriving a business case is really, really difficult because you're just doing it for the first time. You're also working with startups. So these are quite small organizations. They haven't really got much of a track record. They financially might not be as stable as you typically want them to be. And that doesn't really tick all the boxes that a traditional, you know, organization with processes that are set would like. So I think that's sort of one of the sorts of barriers certainly that we've seen. I think in terms of innovation approaches, I think in your introduction, I think you probably picked up on the most strategically effective one I've seen, which is around innovation labs, really. And only really do they work when you have sponsorship at a board level, but also across multiple functions again. I think where you have maybe R&D and IT and supply chain organisation sort of investing into that, I think is where you've got the biggest chance of actually having success. And I think by sort of putting a sort of a multifunctional team into a centre of excellence or a laboratory, whatever you decide to call it, you can really found opportunities to accelerate technology development and adoption. But also around, it's a great place to engage with the organisation, bring them into an area where they're not typically within the manufacturing environment. They get to be part of the development of that solution. And really that helps, get in the buy-in from the organisation. But also this sort of MVP approach you mentioned, Patrick, really helps you to test the solution, develop that business case, but also helps you to fail quickly. The worst case is that you sort of get onto this waterfall approach and you spend millions doing it, and then you find at the end of it that you actually haven't got a great solution that works. I think that the point with the MVP approach is to try something, fail very quickly, move on to something that actually can work as well.
Yeah, learning to fail is really key in these things.
So in terms of those points around adoption, and any questions from the audience? Let's open it up again. Maybe ones related to regulatory. Yes.
Barriers.
Maybe not a question, but a comment. I've just gone through my own digital education 4 months ago, and I was a complete nitwit on that front.
Thank you for your honesty.
But what I observed in that process is this is a very different discipline from what is a typical pharmaceutical discipline. And you talk about two different worlds. And the buzzwords that I had to learn in terms of understanding things like AI or what this means, because you can talk about it as much as you want, unless you see it, you don't even know it or internalize it. And what has helped in a program that I went through is actually seeing what's going on and how disruptive it is, getting the cliche burning platform, if you will, because it's not about shoving this down the throat. You have to want to adopt it. You will only do that if you see a significant gain or if you move away from a major pain. Those are the two key drivers that drive human behavior and organizational behavior. So if you can do that, and I had my VR introduction, 1 year of biotechnology 25 years ago was taken care of in 10 minutes. So that is kind of an insight that you gain. And now I'm actually in my team designing a VR suite for the medicinal chemist going on. So it came from showing learning the buzzwords and taking those away and understanding what it is really going to do for you. If you're not able to do that, you won't get through. Because it's a very conservative industry. This is a knowledge, a domain that nobody knows about in practical sense.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. And I was in another conference like this 2 weeks ago, and there was a very seasoned chemist, and he was openly arguing that how was a computer going to replace him and all his science? So unless you see it and you have, you realize your own Kodak moment. Kodak is the inventor of the digital camera. I think the rest is history. You don't want to be in a Kodak meeting in 5 years from now. So it is no longer a question of talk. You have to go this way, otherwise you're missing the boat to a large extent.
And that's why there's been this step change in the last 3 to 4 years, whereas it was something we're looking at, we're examining, and now I think every company has some kind of digital office. In fact, most of them have more than one, focusing on different areas. So that's not just an executive sponsorship area, but it's just really focusing as a company at the highest level, because it's going to transform. Otherwise, we see these potential failures of Fortune 500 companies changing.
You got another question?
It wasn't not Hitesh Varambia, not really a question, just some insights with regards to artificial intelligence, and I'm relishing the day actually when the digital me gives informed consent on a clinical trial that I may or may not be participating or I may or may not know about. But I think when we talk about barriers to entry and stuff, and what's been resonating in my mind as I've sat through some of the other discussions is Douglas Rain. For those millennials in the room, forgive me, I'm going to quote from Stanley Kubrick's Odyssey 2001, HAL, open the pod bay doors. So you've got an AI system that challenges human intelligence. Do you think we'll ever get there? We're talking about Industry 4.0, but what about AI disrupting my day job?
Well, come. It's a question of how quickly and when and how we manage that, I think. I don't think, for me at the moment, the artificial intelligence discussion around Industry 4.0 seems to be coming into machine learning, maintenance, these types of stuff. And that's, I wouldn't say the limit to the ambitions that we see in the industry, but that's certainly, again, cutting it down to a size where I can make it tangible, I can make it visible, I can sell it. But to, you know, we see these, I see this vision as well. I've had this vision as well of the digital me, you know. I think it's a great point. I don't know when.
I think it's about ambition as well, and use case application. So, you know, there's work going on at the moment in terms of a cognitive system that can predict performance in manufacturing. So, you know, that's not 5 years away. That's actually happening right now. So there's some really exciting use cases about how to apply technology, and it comes back to the point that you made. It's like, how are you engaging with people that's going to enable this work to happen? It's got to be about return on investment. It's got to be something they understand.
Just to elaborate on that return on investment, not far from the road from where you are, there's a Coca-Cola facility.
Yeah. Lights
out manufacturing to a degree. Their manufacturing costs are really the electricity that they use in the water. The labour costs are minimal. And I think from a farmer perspective, we've got loads to learn. And I'm just trying to understand, what are the hurdles then for us to engage in that? If you're saying the differentials are 15% industry, other industries, and 40% farmer, why aren't we having those kind of meaningful conversations?
One of the reasons is that we ask our operators if they think that a robot can do their job, and not many operators say, yes, I think it can. You know, I've seen that survey, that discussion.
Yeah.
And again, we talk about hiding behind regulations too. I think it's coming. That's definitely coming, but to zero, I don't think so.
Exposure and access, you know, basically.
Patrick?
Yeah, go for it.
To be very honest, from my point of view, at least from where we are today, the influence in the next years of AI as we know it today is completely overestimated. And we heard it in the panel discussion before. Means that this is, from today's point of view, not more and not less than a tool. And a tool is good if you have the right problem where the tool helps you to solve the problem. And you cannot use AI for everything. It's only a tool. And you have to have the condition where the tool is helpful, then you can use it, and if not, it's not helpful, that's it. And you can do it in terms of predictive maintenance. You can use it, for example, in a pattern recognition, okay, but not everywhere. And that's why I think we should keep it. We should let me say we should be realistic and should say where we have the right ideas, and then we should discuss about it. And that's it from my point of view.
So, just moving on, right? We don't have huge amounts of time left, but a succinct response on this. How do people get started? So, Werner, you know, from your perspective, how does a company that's just educating themselves in digitalization and Industry 4.0, what's the first step?
The first step, I hate to say it, but it's more or less a classical approach. You have to find out where these new tools, these new fancy tools are very helpful. So how can you do it? First of all, you need a kind of an assessment with an experienced team. Experience means you have to have know-how of the vertical pillar, of the, let me say, specificas of a branch. But you have to have also guys who are able to understand the effects of these Industry 4.0 tool sets, and you have to evaluate where these tools could make sense, where these tools help you to make the efficiency better, the scrap lower, the quality higher, the lead times lower. So that's it. And once you have detected this area, you have to make a kind of proof of concept, and you say, okay, will it work or not? Is it probable or not? And once you have it, you have to make a kind of, let me say, a master plan or a roadmap. But you have to be very careful, because this first step takes 4 weeks, 5 weeks, so not more. 6 weeks, okay? Not more. And then you have to have at least a vision, and you have to have an idea what are the next steps. But the next steps could be that these next steps only could be tackled on an agile approach. And you have to be very honest to yourself and say, okay, errors are allowed. And if we have detected an error, okay, then we stop and then we go another way.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the point that the gentleman in the audience made earlier, I think digitalization by definition is very nebulous, and I think the fact that there are open access sort of facilities where you can actually look at digitalization technologies in action is absolutely key. I think even for myself, I work for a digitalization company, but it's not until even our own solutions, they only really come to life when I go and visit a customer. But I think with MMIC, the lab Patrick has, the Living Lab, Siemens has, there's a lot of places now you can go and actually see some of these solutions working, and that is surely the best way to, find out what it does, but also what it doesn't do, because I think sometimes we have these complete fantasies about what can be done, and so it's my advice would be go to one or several of these open access facilities and see what people are doing. It's
very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on, George.
So I guess from my point of view, where to start, I think it's a number of ways, right? Across an organisation, you can digitise kind of three areas, really. One is the products that you have, so that may be the drugs or a consumer product itself. So you can start to think, and I think, you kind of got to almost look long-term around what your products are going to look like. I think the other piece is around actually how you engage with the customer. So, you can also start to look at how you digitize that engagement that you have with the customer themselves, or get closer to that customer through maybe e-commerce or the product as well. And then the other piece is around actually how you digitize the value chain itself as well. I think you kind of need to look at almost all three in some respects. I think you almost have to have almost a kind of a visionary approach to what your organization is going to look like, but then almost start to pick at that with maybe small pieces of technology and start to get some improvements and not necessarily spend a huge amount of money doing that. Gain some momentum. I think certainly the way that we started initially around data is an interesting area to really start, because the cost is relatively low and the benefits could be quite large. But I think that's probably what my answer to that would be.
And pre-competitive sharing and collaboration is obviously going to be key. We heard Dave talk about NIBR PIPs in Singapore, industry strategy challenge fund, in Made Smarter, all ways and means that for the pharmaceutical industry to really accelerate. Because probably one of the closing messages is there isn't an option. There is not an option for us to modernise and digitalise our manufacturing operations and our supply chain. If we don't, it will go somewhere else. And one of the things that I haven't heard in this conference enough is that it won't go to an offshore company, it will go to Amazon. It absolutely will go to Amazon. We need, as a group of people, to really start, thinking about how we can disrupt the disruptors. We're on a journey. We're learning how to, innovate in a manufacturing sense, but we've got to start thinking more broadly. And there's some really healthy pockets of people thinking differently, and we need to accelerate that. Any other questions from the floor before? Yes.
One question I have is, when you talk to companies, because they don't all have similar platforms, right? Some companies have been acquired by other ones, so you take a big company, some people are going to be using Siemens, other people are going to be using Emerson and stuff. So when you talk to them, they say, oh, now to go to Industry 4, you have to harmonize, and that's going to take a lot of money. Like, how do you pass the message that this is not necessary? They can use existing platforms in a smart way without having to do huge investments. Could you elaborate on this?
I think it's another tool in the toolbox. As I said before, data virtualization, the way you use a big data cluster, the way you engage and collaborate around standards. That there are a lot of different tools that can be employed to ensure that you can integrate data from many different platforms and manage it in a secure way. I think another key is to really communicate this problem outside of our industry, because it's been fixed in other places. It's not, the time series data is a big challenge, but it's fixed. I mean, I was having a fantastic conversation with Cisco recently about effectively using technology that's more like a network switch to manage data, you know, and that's what we need to be doing. But I think the mindset and attitude has to be around how do we get people to stop seeing that as a barrier and start looking for solutions to just move forward, because a lot of people have got it on put certain data uses on hold. Anyone else from the panel? Sorry, I'm around.
Yeah, there are very good practices in other industries. I remember a workshop where we had the discussion, and IT said, yes, our budget for the next 2 years is fixed, and we have no resources to do anything. Yes, so it was in a Industry 4.0 workshop. Then we say, okay, then we use the cloud. Then we have the possibility to create a bimodal IT infrastructure, to have the classical MES, ERP, PLC way of working with information. And we have the second one. And the second one is to have a sensor and to have something like an Arduino and moving the information you collect there directly into the cloud. And then you can do whatever you want within the cloud. And exactly this company is doing this way of handling information right now and today.
Any other last questions before we wrap up today? Yes, Dave.
Patrick, I was just reflecting on the previous conversation about why can't we get this industry and the people that are around about it really motivated to drive a digital strategy? That I thought was a great question. And we reflected on the automotive industry where they had to transform to survive.
Yeah.
And now you see them going a step further into driverless cars because they're adding something to society. That's a good thing. For us as human beings. We don't have to worry about driving cars, and they can automatically be done safer. And I don't think yet as an industry we are framing the real society problems. We talk about efficiency in a manufacturing plant. Just to be a little bit controversial, the cost of goods are 5 to 10%. You might save 0.5%. You'll be lucky if you pass it on to the consumer. I'm not sure that is a strategic narrative on digital. But if you can get those drugs developed faster so that patient gets them faster, if you can address adherence so there's better return for the investment that comes from the drug spill, if you can address precision medicine so that we'll stop prescribing patients drugs that add no value to them and giving them drugs that actually add value, when we describe that strategic narrative, then I think we've got a chance of transforming this industry into a digital world.
Yeah.
But if we just keep talking about our little bubble, about factory by factory efficiency, I am not yet convinced it's such a compelling business case when you're sitting on the board of directors of a big company.
I think it's a really good point. And it comes back to the theme of this session, really. It's about evolution. I think people are going on a journey. They're trying to learn. But what we've seen so far is that the aha moments come thick and fast. As people, like you, we started an infrastructure project, we moved to capital efficiency because that's what the business needed. The agenda of supply chain is becoming more and more clear. Thinking about what the patient needs is a key component of that. And people are starting to recognise on those journeys exactly what digital opportunities there are. So I think your point is really good. I think the question is how do we use the MVP to leapfrog in such a strategic, disruptive conversation? It's a good one. Good. Thank you very much for everyone's attention this afternoon. I know it was just after lunch and everyone stayed awake. Well, most people. Jag fell asleep a little bit, but no. Thanks very much.